I'm reading A Lot to Remember. This is largely a journey about the travels of Joan Marshall Grant through an area of France called Lot. And she traveled there with Denys, her husband, her last husband, and Charles. In fact, this book is dedicated to them. With love to Denys and Charles, A Lot to Remember, she wrote. She died in 1989. This was published in 1962. And I'm now at chapter 16. Chapter 16, Landscape for Banners. When Charles and I went to Villeneuve-sur-Lot, which is 34 kilometers southwest of Bonaguil by the N111, we intended to spend only one night there on our way upriver from Bordeaux. But we were so comfortable at the Hotel Gache that we lingered for the first week of June and returned to an even warmer welcome from Madame Gache that August. Should you be a light sleeper, even when lulled by her admirable meals, ask for a room overlooking the courtyard, for however much one has enjoyed looking at the renowned fruit and vegetable blazoning the stores of the lovely market square, one feels less romantic about them when lorries taking them to Paris grind through the narrow streets soon after dawn. Precipitous steps lead down from the old bridge to the water's edge where, in the sunlight, patient anglers drowse. But if you explore the riverside path at night, as I did on my first evening, keep sufficiently alert to hear a window open far above you. For the casement in one of the ancient houses, which cling to the cliff face like swallows' nests, will not be opening wide on fairy lands forlorn except to disgorge the contents of a household bucket. But such hazards are of minimal importance compared to the pleasure of getting close to the sound and surge of the moonlit weir. Villeneuve-sur-Lot was one of the new towns which were built entire instead of developing haphazardly round the core of a castle or monastery. When this part of France was under beneficent Plantagenet rulership during the 12th and 13th century, these bastides, the contemporary name which some of them still retain, have a grid of streets enclosed by a circular defensive wall, pierced by 4 towered gates. This basic plan sometimes being modified to suit the local terrain. At the center is the marketplace, containing a paved platform under a pillared roof and surrounded by cloisters which support the upper floors of houses. The church, also usually near the center of the town, is strongly fortified, so it can serve the same purpose as does the keep in a castle's defense works. Bastides have a much greater significance than merely being a startling innovation in the development of town planning, for they were designed to house and protect a new story of society, which for centuries had consisted of a ground floor of nobility and an attic of clerics, poised uneasily above a basement of serfs. Through the ethic promulgated the Eleanor of Aquitaine, a new level of the social structure now became important. This was the middle class, largely composed of men who had been serfs until it was recognized that serfs might become a profitable investment if given the status of freemen, who could produce revenue for their former owners. The land necessary to feed the population of Bastide, the tools and materials for its dwelling houses, and the construction of the town wall and its defences were provided either by the crown or by a private landowner. He, in return, received 10% of the production, in cash or in kind, from every male who lived there. But this tithe was not levied on a serf until he had been free for 7 years, during which time he must build a house on the plot assigned to him, completing the first story before the end of the 2nd year, and learn a trade or craft by which to support himself and his family, who, in the interim period, had been maintained by the Bastides' overlord. Bastides developed a fervent civic pride, but except during the War of Religion, the rivalry between them was similar to that enjoyed by opposing factions at a cup final. For instance, the Dr de Selig recounts in his memoirs how Villefranche de Périgord raided Montpazier on a night of 1576 to find the gates unguarded, and so few men in the town that they carried off a quantity of booty with surprising ease. In good heart, they tramped the 8 miles home, being unaware that the men of Montpazier were following a parallel path on their way back from an equally unopposed foray. Both teams were received by the infuriated women, who could be pacified only by calling the match a draw and returning every stolen object to its rightful owner. Montpazier, its mellow stone glowing in the sunlight like new run honey, is 44 kilometers northeast of Villeneuve-sur-Lot by the N676 and the D104. And on the way there are Montflanquin and Villeral, both Bastides well worth exploring. The Chateau de Biron is 8 kilometers to the south of Montpazier, and you will have seen it in the distance from several angles, for it commands the landscape. I first went to Biron with Charles in June, when the place was deserted except for the caretaker and his young son, who were bottling off wine from the Chateau vineyard. Charles joined them in this pleasing occupation, while I wandered through echoing rooms in search of the Duc de Biron's ghost, who is said to haunt the staircase, carrying his head under his arm in protest against his execution for treason by Henry IV. Although the conditions were ideal, I found no sniff of a spook, nor was I able to reconstruct, except in the pallid turn when the Duke or his father, who too was a Marshal of France, dispensed their lavish 16th century hospitality. I then went to the Renaissance chapel on the ramparts of the outer courtyard, but here again I felt nothing but pleasure in its architecture, and this pleasure somewhat diminished, because it was cluttered with scaffolding outside